Parshat Tisa. This share is dedicated to the memory of Rachalea Bas Reb Chaim Tzvi. Parshat Tisa is a packed parsha. It begins by finishing off discussing the command for the Mishkan to build the tabernacle. And then we have the story of the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. And afterwards, the parsha discusses the aftermath of the sin of the golden calf, relating to many different things. I would like to discuss one of the effects of the sin of the golden calf, namely, Moshe removing his tent from the camp of the Jewish people. So let's begin. We're in chapter 33, verse 7. It's actually the middle of the paragraph, but I'm not going to read the beginning of the paragraph. We are starting in the middle. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of the background of what's going on. At the beginning of chapter 33, God said to Moshe, basically because of the sin of the golden calf, because I see that the Jewish people are a stiff-necked people, I want you to bring them up to the land of Israel, and I'm going to send an angel to lead them into the land of Israel. And the Jewish people are distraught, and they mourn this decree that an angel is going to be leading them into the land of Israel instead of God being in their midst. And God tells them to remove their crowns, which we're not going to discuss what that is right now, and they remove their crowns. Which brings us to our section. Again, chapter 33, verse 7. And Moshe took, or would take, or was taking his tent, the tent, and he pitched it far from the camp. Far from the camp. Michutz l'machane means outside the camp, and harchek min hamachane means far from the camp. So Moshe takes the tent, he takes it out of the camp, and he pitches it far from the camp. The karalo ohel moed, and he calls this tent the tent of meeting. V'haya kol mevakesh Hashem, and it was anybody who seeks God, yetzei el ohel moed, will go out to this tent of meeting. Asher michutz l'machane, that's on the outskirts of the camp. So this is one of the effects, one of the things that happens as a result of the golden calf. God just told Moshe that he is going to be removing himself from the Jewish people, and instead of God himself leading the Jewish people into the desert, into the land of Israel, he's going to send an angel to lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. We discussed this a few parshot ago. Now, we know, based on our previous discussion, that Moshe is actually going to protest this decree from God. Before Moshe protests this decree, he does something which seems to be an acknowledgement of God removing his presence from the camp of the Jewish people. What's Moshe's acknowledgement of God's removing his presence? Moshe removes his tent from the camp of the Jewish people. Initially, we're not really sure what tent it is. We're told, and Moshe removed the tent. Is this a specific tent where he would just communicate with God? Or the tent where Moshe, led the Jewish people and taught them? Or is this Moshe's personal tent where he lived in? It's a discussion among the commentaries. Most of them, such as Ibn Ezra, Rashi, and others, say that yes, this is Moshe's personal tent, the tent that he lived in. God would speak to Moshe in his own tent, and now Moshe is removing his tent out of the camp of the Jewish people. And anybody who is seeking God, what does that mean to seek God? Well, we'll see what Rashi says. I think according to the Pshat, if somebody, and this is what the Malbim definitely says, anybody who wanted to learn something from God, who wanted to find out what God's will was, who had a request of God, again, cannot communicate with God, or rather God will not communicate with them in the camp. Therefore, they have to go outside of the camp where Moshe has now pitched his tent, and then they can, transmit a request to God through Moshe. So, Moshe takes his tent. Again, we said either his own personal tent, like Rashi, Ibn Ezra, or according to Malbim, the tent that he had, a special tent, which was for teaching and for communicating with the Jewish people, and perhaps that was a place where he only communicated with God. And he pitches it outside of the camp. And if somebody was seeking God, they couldn't actually seek out God in the camp. God would not communicate with them in the camp, but that they have to go out of the camp to this tent. Now, what does Moshe call this tent? Apparently, before it doesn't have a name, and now it does get a name. Its name is Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, which leads us to our next question: who is it a meeting between? I think according to the Pshat, It's simply the place where Moshe communicates with God. It's a tent of meeting between Moshe and God. And that is what Ibn Ezra and others say. Again, this is called a tent of meeting because it is the place where Moshe would communicate and, so to speak, meet up with God when God would communicate with Moshe. Malbim adds on that it's also called a tent of meeting because this is a place that is designated for communicating with God. It's a slight difference. One is actual meeting, communicating with God. One is a place that's designated for God's presence. Both these explanations are based on the word moed. We say moed is a holiday. It's a time. Moed also means a meeting, and it also can be related to the root miyuad, or designated. Malbim says the word here, ohel moed, the tent of meeting, is related to two of the roots, miyuad, designated. It is a tent that is designated for God's presence, and in addition, others, such as Ibn Ezra and Malbim agrees, say moed, and also Ramban, they all say moed is a place where Moshe met God when he communicated with God. So we have a special tent for communication with God, and this tent has been removed from the camp of the Jewish people and now is outside the camp of the Jewish people.